everybody. Thank you so much for having me. There's nothing I love better than hanging out with a bunch of entrepreneurs, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people that have ideas. And specifically that have ideas that they want to execute on. So I want to talk about execution from a couple different perspectives. I've essentially got two stories to share with you today. As Katie mentioned, I'm here from Infusionsoft. We're a marketing automation software for small businesses. We're right here down the street, like about 5 miles here at the Basin border. And we're really excited to be a sponsor and support this effort. And I really hope that you guys get a ton of value out of this weekend. It's really special that Chandler supports these kinds of events like this. So you can't see that picture, but that's me. I don't know if you can see it there. Growing up, I was raised by 2 Hungarian immigrants. I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up in a house where it was all about execution. It was all about what you did, not about what you said you were going to do. It was about what you did. And I really wish you could see this picture because I have a really mean, badass look on my face here at the age of 4. And I had big dreams. I was going to be a solid gold dancer. Or at 8, that was what I was going to be. And then when I got through school, I was doing some college back on the East Coast, and I was going to be a buyer. I was going to live in Manhattan and live that life and be a buyer, buy stuff, clothes, shoes, whatever it was going to be. And then my path changed, and I ended up at ASU, came out here to Arizona, and this is where I ended up staying. From the time here when I graduated from ASU, I took a couple marketing gigs, entry-level kinds of things, and then I found my way to BizAZ magazine. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of BizAZ magazine. Few of you? Okay, cool. So this was a magazine that Brian Sachs and I co-founded in about 97, and it was a publishing company, and our product was a magazine. He and I worked together for about 6 months before we realized that we kind of liked each other, and started sleeping with the boss at one point. So we, from that point on, were together. We've been together for a decade now. So we ended up getting married about 1.5 years into working with each other. But we took this business and we built it. And it's very different from, it was a startup, no question, but it was very different from what you guys were looking at, which is technology. But there are some similarities there. Every issue that we did, I was the editor and Brian was the publisher. Every one was a baby that we had created, and we iterated on it with each turn. We did about 6 issues a year. By the time we matured the business, we had a number of different revenue offerings. We had a couple different customers. We had advertisers that had certain needs and some value that we needed to drive to them. And we also had readers, and they were looking for certain things that were different from what advertisers were looking for. At the end of the day, though, for us, it was about driving value for both of those constituencies. So we had a magazine. We created events that we sold sponsorship for. We had a website. We had an email newsletter. We had a variety of things. They were all products that we created. And like I mentioned, iteration was really important. So important that it caused us to create some pretty solid value in the company. We ended up selling BizAZ to Gannett, which you guys know is the Arizona Republic here locally. And they did such an awesome job with it that they, within 2 years, closed it. So I'm really proud of the work that we had done up until that point. It's just, for us as entrepreneurs, it was a shame to see what the Republic did and didn't end up doing with it. As an aside, Brian, the entrepreneur that he is, ended up trying to go and work inside Gannett, and that worked for about 6 months, and we were leaving Gannett at that point. But that's just a little bit about me from that point on, starting businesses. And from there, I went to the Arizona Technology Council, and I started up another magazine called Tech Connect. This is where I got the bug for technology companies, startups, launching products, really around the idea, how do you package the story? How do you launch into new markets? And so this really created the bug and had me move from the publishing around stories of just general business to stories around technology companies. From there, I left and created Sachs Public Relations, which was my services firm. Again, we worked with technology companies. And I've learned, a ton along the way. Number one, be careful who you work with, you might marry them. The other is working your ass off. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys are, this is your moonlighting, right? So you have a full-time job that's outside of what you're working on here? Yes, lots of you? Great, so you have to really burn the midnight oil. And when I think back to the days of BizAZ, we worked nonstop, and it's a good thing I didn't have kids at the time because I don't know how we would have ever been able to create the value that we did and form a business that we were able to sell the way that we did. It's all about putting in the hours, and there's no magic pill, and that's something that we discovered. at the time in our startup. The other is the power is in the execution. We didn't spend a lot of time strategizing and thinking through what-if scenarios. We kind of came up with an idea, and then we go ahead and execute and throw it out and see whether our customers were interested in that. And if they weren't, then we would zig, and then we would zag, and we'd come up with something that they wanted to buy. And ultimately, create a business that created value. And then lastly, my lesson from Saks PR was around products and versus services. I'm not into the business. I don't recommend selling billable hours, because that's what I did with Saks PR. And about 2-3 years into it, I realized this is not the business model for me. This is not what I wanted to spend my time looking to dominate the world, because it's a really hard model. And so for all of you here, I'm assuming most of you guys have web apps and kind of mobile apps that you're working on, and it's a product that's sold as a web-based service. Maybe it's a one-time fee, but it's got a recurring element to it, and that's the way to go. So those are some of my history, and the segue from here is the story that I'm about to tell you around Infusionsoft. Infusionsoft was a client of mine. That's how I ended up working with them. And when I came on board as their PR consultant, we were about 30 employees. So we were a small company, and we still fashioned ourselves at the time as a startup. So I started working with them, and it wasn't until recently, about 1.5 years ago, that I came on board full-time to work with Infusionsoft. It's been a lot of fun ever since. So the story I'm about to tell you is about Scott Martineau and his brother Eric Martineau. These two guys came from a big family, and they both had interest in technology, and their father was an entrepreneur, had a law firm and had a couple other businesses, one of which was called Balloon Attractions. And it was a animal balloon twisting business. I'm sure you've either seen or hired them for your own stuff. And so this is the business. And there was some really manual grunt labor associated with scheduling. Just to schedule all your balloon makers, they would have to dial into some 800 number to get their schedule for the day as to what location they were going to be at. So Scott and Eric were like, okay, this is crazy. There's got to be a better, easier way to do this. So they created an app that ended up doing the scheduling and kind of aggregated all that information so you could go online to get the information that you needed. That was the segue for them to start developing software. They started Infusionsoft together. It was a custom software company. They brought on this guy, Clayton Mask, who is now our CEO. So together, these three were the co-founders of Infusionsoft. And it looked like a very different company back then than it does today. This was what you call a lean startup, no joke. Originally, this is headquarters 1.5. 1.0 was in Scott's house where they worked, and they ended up getting kicked out by his wife, and they ended up in this space, which was beautifully sandwiched between a mattress firm and a photography studio. And there's one story that's really funny to hear these guys share, and that's one day. So I don't know if you can see, but their door is covered in paper because they just didn't want to get any light coming in. I don't know, coding, Mountain Dew, pizza, something about the fact that they just didn't want light coming in. So at one point, they heard this knocking on the door. And I'm like, what's that? They open the door, and it's cops standing there in front of them. Apparently, one of the neighbors had called in and reported some strange smelling, or some strange smells coming from the space, and they thought that it was a meth lab. So it's always fun to hear the guys tell that story. It didn't turn into anything, but nonetheless, this was the startup days. They had a really sweet office, totally sweet computers that you can see here, and this is where the magic happened. And these were exciting times. This was around 2001, 2002. They had a custom software shop that evolved into a semi-custom software shop, and that eventually turned into a product that they would release on development cycles. And it is what we call today Infusionsoft. So who do we serve? We serve small businesses. Eric, Scott, and Clay saw that there was a problem out there. You've got small business owners who run organizations, and they have marketing and sales needs. All of you guys come up with your products, and what ends up happening? You need to find users, right? So you got to get out and find those users. You need to market and sell them. So small businesses are faced with this as options: a bunch of point solutions that don't talk to each other, and you're forced to try to integrate them, and you end up in an import-export nightmare, and you lose a ton of really important prospect customer data: who purchased what they clicked on. That's what ends up happening. And so what these guys saw was there was a need to put that all together. What they recognized was that there was a need for this single, integrated, automated system. So we came up with marketing automation for small businesses. This is their website today. But it wasn't always it wasn't always this clear. And in the beginning, we fashioned ourselves as CRM developers, because marketing automation really wasn't a category that was really very well known. So so we look at our history as 2001, these guys got together. 2004 was actually where we had a product that we ended up, that we were selling at. Around this time, we had about 150 customers. And it was Eric Martineau plus a few developers, a software developer and then a web developer. And this is what it looked like. In fact, we called it Infusion, it was called Managed Pro CRM. And you can see the interface, it's changed a ton. But these guys were about execution. There weren't, for them it was about getting data, getting information from the users, getting the feedback and iterating on it. I mentioned 150 customers. Let me kind of share this with you. This picture is actually the servers that these guys had when they were moving from one space to another. Then you talk about 5 nines in uptime. Well, this was about a 2-hour downtime for their customers, and this was how they just beautifully had stuck all the servers in the trunk of, I think, Eric's car to move from one office space to the other. And that's how they did it back then. And it's something that we're really proud of, that we've been able to grow to the extent that we have, but it wasn't an easy road. Today we've got about 30 engineers, we've got 8 people in product management, and back then, like I said, we had about 4 software developers. And we've had a number of lessons in execution that I want to share with you all. One is that version 1 is better than version none, and that's actually a little different than what I had originally put together, but it's really important. Mark Chesley is our VP of development, and I don't know how many of you out there are just procrastinating and just trying to put in all these different features and not sure when the painting is done. Here's what it comes down to. Version 1 is way better than version none. If these guys would have waited and waited and waited to get the perfect product out to their customers, they wouldn't have been able to iterate to the extent that they have and enhance the product and have the learnings that they were seeking through it. It really comes down to the perfect is not the goal. Shipping is the goal. Shipping is just so absolutely critical, and it comes down to don't fall into the temptation of prolonging your launch to add just one more feature. That's not the way to go. It's really about shipping, and I want to share a book with you. How many of you guys have read Getting Real from the founders of 37 Signals? Awesome book. It's exactly the kind of subject matter that you guys should be looking at. It's about how do you get your idea to software in the hands of users, and what does that process look like, and how do you speed that process up so you can iterate and learn from each release to get a product in the hands of your customers that they find values in, that actually answers their benefits. Because at the end of the day, that's why you're here, right? You've got a purpose, and that purpose is answered with a product that you put in the hands of people who gain benefit from that. And the larger goal of that is to achieve the vision and purpose that you yourself have. So I highly recommend you grab this book. It's on Amazon, you can get it anywhere. And then lastly, you want to iterate. I mentioned this before. Iterating is absolutely your best friend. Back then, we didn't have a very long development cycle. We had guys in a room coding. We didn't even really have an official PM function. Scott served as our product manager. We didn't have QA. It was just, kind of duct taped together. And these guys worked really hard. And what they did was they garnered feedback from users. They asked neighbors. They asked friends to get this list of features, these suggestions. And Mark Chesley, who I referenced earlier, our VP of development, likes to say that back then, bugs and feature suggestions to him were like sales leads. He wanted them, he needed them. Today, our development cycle is very different. Our solution, as I mentioned, is an all-in-one suite. It's about automating follow-up, because ultimately it's about converting more leads, getting repeat sales, and saving time. How many of you guys wish that you could convert more leads when you're going to be at a point to get your product to people's in users' hands? You're not at that point yet, but at that point when you have a product to sell, it's about how do you get people interested in your product. But what's interesting is that we're not for everyone. There's plenty of small businesses out there. There's 28 million of them, but we actually have about 6,500 customers. So there's a big gap there. We've got about 21,000 users. They're worldwide. They're in North America, and they're global. But for us, as I mentioned earlier, the secret and and what I want to share with you today is simply around don't stall, don't procrastinate, get that product in the hands of customers. That's where the learnings happen. For us, the secret to failure is about failing and failing fast. As I mentioned, our development team is real different. Today, we have the PM function that works alongside our engineers, which is totally unique. We have engineers that are talking to customers and working alongside product managers to understand the benefit statements that users are seeking to get from the software. And so it's become a really different environment where today we don't look at long lists of features and suggestions necessarily. We're talking to the customers and engaging on the benefit side. But where you are today, it's about getting the product in the hands of users. I mean, right now, from what I understand, everyone's in an idea stage, right? So the purpose of this weekend is to get to a place where you can start to code product. Yes? Mm-hmm. Right. So I implore you to fail, make mistakes, figure out ways to get lessons learned and get to those lessons faster, because at the end of the day, that's how you achieve your purpose. That's how you get where you want to go. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about execution from a little bit more of a tactical perspective for Startup Weekend, given the time constraints that we have. So, push forward. So the first thing, crazy. So the first thing you need to do as a team, so you get your team together and you go to sit down, is when you're getting to the execution part, is you need to define the goal of the company that you're forming. What are you going to do? What is it that you stand for? Okay, you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm distracted by the person coming in. I'm sorry.
And then the second thing, define what you see as success for the weekend. So you have 54 hours to achieve something. So what does that look like for you? So at the end of 54 hours, do you want to have a plan to move forward? Do you want to have a perspective on your market? Do you want to have something actually launched? What is it for whatever it is you're doing that you would consider to be success? Okay, so here's a very condensed product management for dummies. First thing, I would go through this before you get started doing anything, just ask yourself, why are we doing this and what problem are we solving? What is it that you are going to actually execute? What is it that you're going to solve? And this is to kind of get your brain moving in the direction of what's important to the user base that you're going to be going after. So that's the second question: is who's it for? Who's your primary audience? And then who's your secondary audience, if there is such a thing? It really depends on the type of product you have, but you're going to do things very differently depending on who's actually going to be using this product. If it's for an elderly crowd, you're not going to want to have tiny fonts, and you're not going to want to have it be really complex because you have a crowd that doesn't have a lot of technical knowledge. And so then that goes to the second question, which is what's important to them. So think of these as the roles or personas in a marketing perspective. Is what kind of things do these people care about? If they're women, they're going to care about certain visual things more than men. Or are they kids, and do they care about social interactions? What's important to the users? And then the last one is, which is actually probably pretty easy to answer, which is what are your constraints? And one is you've got 54 hours. And then other than that, what are your constraints? Who are your competitors? What skill sets do you have? Those kinds of things. Okay. So once you have this idea of what it is you're going to build, who it's for, what's important to those people, you're going to brainstorm projects. So this is basically all of the kinds of things that need to be done in order to launch. Right? So a project can be market research, or it can be actually executing the product. But you think of all the kind of high-level things that you have to do as projects. Okay, so this is kind of modeled after getting things done and the natural decision-making processes that we have. So you're going to think about these things. Anything that has more than one task to execute is a project. So take that, cut it in half, then do it again. Okay. Because you are not going to be able to execute all the things that you think that you need. Okay? So after that, then you're going to take each of those projects, and you're going to brainstorm the to-do items for those. Think of these as the end results, the features, depending on what it is you do. If it's actual development, it might be feature sets, it might be user stories. If you do agile, so what if I'm as a user, I should be able to sign up for an account, something like that. Or it might be for marketing purposes, it might be look at X competitor. Then take that list, cut it in half. You need to get down to what is it. This goes to the minimal viable product, to executing and iterating, to getting feedback. You need to get to the first thing you can get in the hands of people as fast as possible. Going back to the story that Authority Labs told, when you launch, it doesn't matter if you can automatically build them. It matters if you might be able to build them, but it doesn't matter if it's nice and elegant and automated, because the user doesn't care. They're going to put their information in, or they're going to call you with that information or whatever. If it's important enough, if the value is high enough, they're going to use your product. They use your product, they're going to tell you what works about it, and more importantly, what's wrong with it, and then you can move forward. Okay, so this is a little more of a tangible. You need to have, in my opinion, you need big, visible lists of the things that you're doing. Okay? If you put them small in some computer somewhere, they're easily overlooked, they're easily neglected, you move on without checking it, whatever. So keep a nice big visible list, whether that's a board with sticky notes or one giant sheet where you write on it, a whiteboard, whatever. Keep a big visible list. As you go through the day and you learn things each day, add to the list. Add it at the bottom. Do it live. Don't try to rethink it. Just add it, and then come back to it later. And review and adjust. So you have this big list of things you need to accomplish, add things to it as you go. You will then take the time, whatever makes sense for you, if that's every 2 hours, every 6 hours, some time schedule that you guys think is reasonable. Come back, look at it, reprioritize that list, get rid of the stuff that's on that list that doesn't make sense anymore, because a lot of your to-do items are going to be big bucket items. And so you're going to go and start to execute on a big bucket, and you're going to realize, okay, there's like 15 other things I need to actually do to accomplish this. So I'm going to add those to the list of things I need to do, and then you can get rid of that bucket, right? So that's pretty much it. I don't really think there's anything.
No, I kept clicking this.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the extent of it. And I think it's important that you realize that the most important thing you remember when you leave here is you have a very finite amount of time to generate something of interest that will move you past this weekend. Because after this weekend is when things will really happen for you. You probably won't sell anything this weekend. Just saying. Maybe you will, but most likely you will not sell anything. You will not make a dime in 54 hours. But after that, the sky's the limit, depending on how well you set it up.
Questions for Steve? All right, thank you, Steve.